Today is day 11. 11 is my favorite number, and so today we're talking about one of my favorite topics. I know everything seems to be my favorite topic, and it kind of is, but I really think that today's topic is very important. So by now you have experienced and practiced metta or loving kindness as a cultivation of one of the qualities of the heart. This practice can be compared to watering the seeds that have the potential to eventually become the loving response to the world around us through our thoughts and actions. And when loving kindness is put into action, we call it compassion. So this takes me to dive a bit deeper into the practice of karuna, or commonly translated to compassion. To begin this topic, I want to share that scientific findings have shown that loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation have a positive influence on our state of being. They also found that compassion meditation reduces stress-induced distress and immune response. I will be sharing additional links to resources of scientific research on these practices if you're curious to learn more about them. Now, compassion is the second quality of the heart that we'll practice in this branch of mindfulness. The first thing to point out here is that as we start to cultivate a practice of mindfulness meditation and we start to become aware of our state of mind and being in general, we quickly realize that the experience of suffering is a common shared experience within humans. We all experience pains, heartbreaks, fear, anxiety, grief, and so on. Now, when we consciously choose to relieve or transform suffering for ourselves or others, that is what compassion or karuna truly means. An important aspect of this quality in action is our ability to be present, listen, and see deeply. When we are able to sit with our own pain or someone else's pain and see that deeply or listen to it deeply, that action on its own brings a sense of relief. Many times while we suffer or are in distress, we are not looking for advice or suggestions on how to fix the situation or ourselves. We're just looking for support and a sense of being held while we're navigating the experience. I have a memory of my teenage years that often comes back to me, perhaps as a way to remind myself to practice compassion. And I would love to share it with you to paint a picture of how this deep listening or holding space for others' suffering can be so transformational. I was about 14 years old and I had an argument with my boyfriend at the time. This happened while I was out in a shopping mall with my mom and a friend of hers. As I hung up the cell phone right after having this argument, I was emotionally shaken up. The reason for my emotional distress was because I was going through a season in which I felt very insecure about myself and I was experiencing jealousy. And I felt like admitting to my jealous thoughts and emotions was going to make me look even more insecure. So I kept quiet, but the feelings and discomfort about it were boiling up even more inside of me and I just couldn't hide it. My mom, which at the time didn't have the tools to navigate this type of situation, saw me in this deep distress and didn't ask me what was happening or why I was feeling the way I felt. In other words, she didn't practice deep listening or deep seeing me. She told me that she was going to have a conversation with my boyfriend to end that situation once and for all if I was going to be emotionally distressed in that relationship. I shared this story to make a clear point about the importance of deep listening and deep seeing. My mom's intentions were still coming from a place of wanting to reduce my suffering. But in her effort to do this, she rushed to a solution that was not taking in consideration my current state of being or what I felt or thought about the situation. There was no presence, no mindfulness, no pause or space to hold the current thoughts and emotions. So this became a moment in my life in which I felt totally inadequate and shameful for feeling the way I felt. As I have mentioned this a few times in this program, when we approach something with an open attitude, wanting to understand without judging or imposing our views, we are able to lead from our heart. So the practice of cultivating an attitude of non-judgmental observation as we meditate becomes a huge training for compassionate action. And it also requires the willingness to hold that pain, distress, or suffering for ourselves or others. If you think about it, my mom in that moment was not able to hold my pain. It was perhaps too much for her to hold. So it is definitely not an easy task, which is the reason why training to strengthen that capacity makes so much sense to me. And having said that, it is important to remember that interpersonal compassion, meaning when it is not self-compassion, is not about taking on the suffering of others in order to remove their suffering. Because if we take on that pain and we suffer too much, then we're unable to help others. So once again here, it requires that mindful pause, that mindful space between the object of attention, in this case, the pain, and the awareness of what is happening. This will allow us to align our intentions with our actions with discernment and hopefully in a harmless way. In the next video, I will expand a bit more on the topic of self-criticism and self-compassion and how all of this relates to the integration of our right and left brain hemispheres. You can now move on to the meditation audio.